Hey everyone, welcome into the Mondopad Mailbag. I am Sarah Hecht, joined by Mike Barrett from the road on the MVP 100 video phone, the new way to collaborate. How's it going out there, Mike?
It's going good. Not as good as we had hoped on this day, but you know, you got to shake it off and turn the page, go to the next one. But it's a nice cold day in Chicago, and team is getting a practice in today and getting set to take on the Bulls tomorrow night.
Absolutely. You know, that one day off in between a set of back-to-back, it's definitely a busy road trip for you guys out there on that 5-game road swing. And so we figured, why not take some questions for fans? So thank you for the time, and let's hop right into it. You guys use the hashtag TBMailbag on Twitter to ask Mike Barrett questions, and we're just going to get those going right away. This first one comes from Brandon, and he said, hey, Mike, why have the Blazers seemed to play down to lesser competition over the last few seasons?
Well, I think a lot of that is, you know, we're focused on the Blazers a lot. There are teams that do this, and you know, I think it's part of its human nature. I mean, you know, when you go into an arena like we went into Detroit the other night, and it's no secret that you know, not a lot of fan support there. There weren't many people in the building last night, although they were enthusiastic. But you go from Madison Square Garden, where everybody is, you know, you're playing in front of celebrities and whatnot, and it's easy to get up. I think at times on the road, you drop your guard a little bit. I think you even do it at home against a team that maybe you feel like you can beat. And I think there is, though, when you've come back a lot of times, and I felt that a little bit last night, you kind of get this false sense of security that, oh, we'll just hit a switch and turn it on. And they tried to do that last night late, and you kind of felt them all of a sudden get a sense of urgency too late. But that's an issue you see. I mean, the one team that I think doesn't usually fall into that, although they lost at Utah a couple nights ago, a bad loss for them, was San Antonio. They have always been a team that has seemed to take care of business when are supposed to do it. And last night, certainly one of those cases with Portland. I felt like the game was unconventional, the way that Minnesota approached it, in the way they attacked. And you know, people always give me a hard time because when a team was without a star, especially a late scratch, I usually say it's not a good thing, when a lot of people say it is a good thing, because it all of a sudden enters into this X factor of you don't know what to expect. It's hard to know what to game plan for, and game planning in the NBA for coaches is so important. And last night was an odd game in that it was a hard game to plan for. And not only did they not have a lot of their guys, they had a lot of young athletic guys who had a lot to prove. The game got so rat-ballish, it's hard to maintain discipline and stay in your own game plan and your own system. And I thought the Blazers, you know, had an uncharacteristic night shooting the ball. They tried to get it all back in a hurry with a three, which normally they can do. But it's back to the original question. I don't know. It is an uncomfortable thing, you know, but it is, again, more human nature than anything else, I would say, that Terry Stotts is very good at keeping them in the moment. And anytime in our pregame interviews, if I even hint to what's coming ahead, he doesn't go there. He just talks about that ball game. I think maybe with Chicago on the horizon and knowing it's 4 games in 5 nights, there was a natural letdown, and it cost him last night.
You know, to elaborate on that a little bit more, do you feel that as an announcer, being right down there on the floor next to the guys, do you feel that early in the game where you're just kind of like, oh, this is just going to be a weird kind of game? Because I know that us watching and sometimes listening to you guys on the call, we can tell that there's just something that's just off. And last night was one of those nights, and we all kind of are used to believing that the Trailblazers are going to come back because they're just so darn good at it this year and have been in the past. But it was just a weird feeling. Do you guys notice that with the players?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like before a ball game, in pregame warm-up sometimes, before we hit the air, you know, I'll stand there and kind of watch the guys, and at times you can tell when they're locked in, and at times, I mean, it's difficult every night to be that, and some nights there's more than others. I thought before the Detroit game, maybe there was a little bit more of a loose feeling. Last night I didn't sense that as much, but definitely as far as the game goes and the type of game it was there, you know, broadcasting games, there are games that are easy to call because the flow is predictable and they're clean games. Last night was weird because it was just absolutely almost rat-ballish, and almost like you're watching guys play ball at the club. And again, I think that's when you have to really lock down with the discipline. And despite the fact that it's a weird attack defensively, There doesn't seem to be a coordinated double team on LaMarcus. It's just a different guy flying over there every game, every possession. So yeah, it had a weird feel to it. But again, you've got to find a way if you're a team, and if you're, the coaches would say this as well. You got to fight through that stuff, because not every game is going to be conventional and go the way you expect it to. And you've got to have enough to fight through those, and they nearly did. And in fact, I would say even in the third, when Portland got down 20 points, there was a timeout, and I still said, and I'm not a guy that says this because during games I'm probably not as optimistic as I should be, but I still felt Portland would win that game. And when they got down about 4, I was like, yeah, now it's going to happen. And you get the feeling maybe the players thought that too. And that's a danger, but I think that it's natural too, and you've seen them come from behind so many times and kind of turn it on when they have to turn it on. So the feeling at that point was, okay, they'll get it done. And then, a couple of missed shots and those 50-50 balls, loose balls, all of them seemed to go to Minnesota. And so they get some credit. They played hard. They played well. They had some guys hit shots who normally haven't been hitting a lot of shots. Corey Brewer is shooting like 15% from three-point land. He hits a big 3 off one of those wild sequences where they get a loose ball. Blazers botched a couple of 3-on-1, 2-on-1 fast breaks. So it was a combination of things, disappointing to be sure, but yes, the game had a definite odd feel to the way it was going.
Yeah, and we haven't had an option to talk about really kind of the Trailblazers muddling through losses too much this season because we've had some early success. And that kind of brings up our next question that comes from Brent. He says, what does the plane feel like after a loss like that, or even, after winning and beating a great team?
Definitely different. I mean, it is. It's after wins. I'm not going to say it's celebratory, but the mood is lighter. And we're in a separate part of the plane. We're in the back. Players are in the front, but we still see them. And different players will walk back, and we'll talk to them. Coach Stotts always strolls back and talks about the game with us. He didn't last night. He walked through briskly to the back and briskly back to his seat. I know they were frustrated by it. So it does have a different feel, and we're close enough to it to where you want to shake off a loss, and oftentimes after a win, it'll be a little louder. Our conversations will be louder, maybe a little more laughter. Everybody with our crew has a good enough sense to where after a game that's frustrating, it's very, very quiet. And we particularly are mindful of that, keep our conversations down, let the coaches do their work because they're right up in front of us. And they start hammering through video for the next ball game, maybe replaying a little bit of that game. So, yeah, we're close enough to the whole situation where if you're part of the traveling party, then you're part of the team. And it is interesting after a loss like that. Now, as you said, we haven't had to talk a lot about difficult times. Every team goes through them. Some haven't. Golden State certainly hasn't so far. They will. Portland will have losses like this. Everybody does. As we said, San Antonio lost to Utah as well, and kind of an odd game there. And you can't. You have to look back on it and look to correct mistakes, but you can't let yourself get mired in that, and especially feeling sorry for yourself. You have to quickly turn the page because nobody feels sorry for you, and the next opponent is coming. So, back to the original question, yes, it does have a different feel. And after doing it a number of years, I used to even get, because we're so close to it, really down after losses at times, especially if you give a game away, and it's human. Fans are like that too. You kind of think about it throughout the night. Last night was the first time this year we kind of had one where it had everybody pretty down because it was just like, ugh, it didn't come back. Things didn't go as expected, but that's part of the NBA. And you give it a day, and I'm glad we had a day off to be able to get ready to focus on Chicago, which will be a big challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, it wasn't like after that Memphis game where the guys were like, well, it's going to happen. It's only one game. But you're right. We get to turn the page because we have another set of back-to-back starting tomorrow, like you said, in Chicago where you're at. And that actually turns us to some of the positives. We've got a great question here that comes from Brian. He says, has Coach opened up the defense a bit, going for more blocks and steals, or is it really just a function of familiarity with these guys playing together for a year now?
No, they haven't changed the way they defend. Terry Stotts is not a guy that believes in getting out and taking chances and forcing turnovers, and that's why you see the fact, for a team that is near the bottom of the league in forcing turnovers, their defensive rating is still really, really high. It's just a different way of doing it. We saw Minnesota in particular scramble around. When we played at Philadelphia a few weeks ago, that was a team that was out in passing lanes and taking all kinds of chances. And yes, it results in maybe a few turnovers and dunks at the other end, and it up-tempos the game. I think coaches tend to do that more when you have a younger team and you're not quite as sure what your offensive plan is. You need to create a way to get more easy baskets so that you take more chances, but that's just not what Coach Stotts does. And I haven't sensed a change defensively. Shot blocking, yeah. I mean, I think Portland defends the paint. In fact, I haven't checked the stats today, but they have been among, if not the leader in restricted area field goal percentage on an opponent. In other words, they block a lot of shots. They affect a lot of shots with their ability to block shots at the rim. So that hasn't changed. That's a part of this team, and Chris Kame has been a huge help with that. Nick Batum had an otherwise off game last night, but he blocked 5 shots. A lot of those were in broken play situations where he's tracking somebody down from behind. But, their defense has been really, really good, and that's been our storyline in a lot of games, has been the fact that the offense, and the players would say this, and Wesley Matthews in particular has said it a lot, I don't think Portland's played a good, a really good offensive game yet. And that's a good thing. I mean, we know it's there. I don't think anybody's going to worry about it. But, they rely on their three-point shooting. It's a big part of their game. But maybe when you fall behind like last night, it becomes more important to hit threes. And if this team just all of a sudden has its guys not hitting threes, that can lead to trouble. And I get the whole live by the three, die by the three. I don't think they're at that point, and I don't think that's exactly how the philosophy necessarily is. On a night like last night, you can say that because nothing else is going your way. And so I think your tendency, especially with this team, any one of these guys can get hot enough to lift a team through a tough stretch. And so I think they probably, when they get down, they have a tendency to try to get it all back with threes. And I think last night when they got it down to 4, whenever that was, 5 minutes left, whatever, I think at that point, had they then settled back into their normal offense, pounded inside the LaMarcus, because Minnesota wasn't double teaming then, and just try to ride him, they would have gotten over the top and gotten the win. But they got some threes, and they were still playing in kind of that hurry-up, desperate mode, where I think if they would have calmed down a little at that point, they probably would have gotten the victory.
Yeah, I'm anxious to see how they rebound tomorrow night, and then of course again on Saturday. It's going to be interesting to see how you come back, because this really is going to be one of the first times this season that they've had to do that. It'll be interesting. Okay, and I love this last question. I know that you want to take some time and prep for these next couple games, so we're going to get this last question in here from Abel, and he says, "Hey Mike, do you think we are truly an elite team, or have we just had a good schedule so far?" And I know that that's going around all over the place. I mean, power rankings just everywhere with the way that the Western Conference is and the Eastern. But what are your thoughts on that? And what have you heard from the guys, if they're talking about that at all?
Well, I think first of all, I would guess, and believe me, I get the question. And it's a good question, and I even thought it last night a little bit. I guess depending on person to person, what's your definition of an elite team? So if you're talking about a top 2 or 3 team in the division, in the conference, yeah, I think so. And I don't think last night changes that by any means. If you're talking about an elite team being a championship contender, like a top 2 team in the league, I don't know yet. We're going to find out, and if not this road trip, then the next one, because we come home from this one for a couple of games, a few days, and then the next road trip is really tough. And so if you want to gauge this team by their road record, wait till Christmas, and then we're going to have a much better idea. And I just don't think the sample size is large enough yet, even though it's 22 games or whatever it is now, 22, where you do have a pretty good idea of what you are, but I want to see what they are after a tough loss. And there haven't been many where we've gone, okay, they lost a game they should have won. Oddly enough, the one game I would put in that category before last night's was the Golden State game, which Golden State's only lost 2 games. But that was a home game where Portland shot, 38, 39%, didn't play well, and had Golden State beaten, and turned it over twice in the last 15 seconds and lost the game. That was a tough one to swallow. Last night's was as well. Depending on how they bounce back from it in Chicago and Indiana, I think will show us a little bit more about this team. But we're still fairly early, and we've seen teams lose, suffer bad losses. And I know that college football time, there's all this talk about what's a good loss, what's a bad loss, and I hate that. But I don't know on the elite question. I would have said, had they won it last night, yes, you find ways to win games. But to get all over them because they drop one like that, you don't want to jump out a window because that happens either. But we're going to find out real soon maybe where they should be classified. But even if the next trip doesn't go well, and even if they go into Christmas having cooled down from this hot start, that's not time to panic either. Nobody's going to, other than Golden State so far, really run away and hide. I think the thing that we look at, the thing that you have to concentrate on, and the only other team that I really look at their results every night is Oklahoma City, because if you win your division, you get home court advantage. That's it. I mean, it doesn't matter what your record is. If you win the division, you get one of the top 4 spots. A lot of people have been doing the math on OKC now that they're healthy. Okay, what do they have to do? And don't forget, OKC at full strength beat Detroit by 2 the other night. That was a game Detroit could have won. They had a chance to win it at the buzzer. If they lose that one with OKC at full strength, and I know they're still a little rusty, what does that say about them? So I guess my point is everybody has tough losses at times. It's how you come back from them, and we've got a long way to go this season. So to make any sweeping judgment to this point, I think is probably premature, but that is a good question. And my first thought last night was after that ball game is, I don't know. If you're an elite team, do you lose a game like that? I don't know. Yeah, I think you still can be, but it puts a dent in their confidence, and that's the only troubling thing. And it's up to them now to try to restore the confidence, and they have a couple of games to do it.
When you're looking at some of that elite team stuff, do you look at all at the defensive and offensive ranking? I know last year, especially towards the end of the last year, so much was put into how offensively efficient the Trailblazers were, but then how really deficient on the defensive side they were. And now people are talking about, those top 10, top 5 rankings in the league on both sides of the ball, and that being a major factor. How much do you look at that?
A little bit, but only really to gauge maybe how they're winning games at this season. And I think Portland's defense has won them games. I mean, you just have to look at the stats. I think the obvious one, and maybe you could chalk some of it up to scheduling, but the fact that they've held 8 opponents below 90 points. They did it 7 times all last year. So forget the detailed stats that your eyes start to glaze over on rating. And I understand that, Portland's defensive rating has been actually higher than their offensive rating, which nobody saw that coming this early in the season. And again, maybe some of it's scheduling so far. Maybe some of it's because you played more home games than road games. But I think the fact that they've held a lot of teams down. In fact, they were holding a team down last night, and the odd thing is, last night's funky. And if there ever was an example of too much is made of stats or they don't always hold, it was last night's game. I mean, Minnesota's given up 110 a game, Portland scoring 105 a game, and the Blazers end up in the 80s. There's no way I thought that would have happened. But again, there are nights where freaky things happen, and last night was certainly one of them. But I think too much maybe gets played on the numbers. We try to give some detailed stats at times, and you get into some of the metrics and stuff. But again, I think maybe at times, and maybe this is just me, too much is paid to that. Because it depends on a team's philosophy. You can make stats say whatever you want to say, and if they don't meet the requirement to the story you're trying to tell, you throw them out and say, oh, they don't matter on this night. So we pay attention to them, and certainly the defensive and offensive ratings we do. But again, sample size, maybe not big enough yet. I know it's been 22 games. Let's wait till at least through Christmas, and maybe we'll have a better idea then.
All right, so we're waiting until Christmas, and of course we're going to be doing these Mondopad mailbags again. Thank you so much for taking the time today to join us. You guys keep using that hashtag TBMailbag on Twitter or on Facebook too, since you can hashtag there, and we will get as many of your questions to whoever we join up with on the road. Hopefully a lot more Mike Barrett coming at you soon. Thanks again, and we'll see you guys next time.